Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Rob Stockwell. At Monroe County Community School Corporation Board meeting on August 22nd, concerned parents and teachers shared their reaction to the passage of House Bill 1608 in the Indiana State House. The new law requires schools to notify parents about a student's name or pronoun change. A student from Kaleidoscope Youth Community, a youth-led organization serving the LGBTQIA+ community, shared their concerns about the bill.
I'm a senior in the MCCSC system, and today I'm going by the name Possum. The day before the first day of school, I caught wind of HB 1608. At first, I wondered if I should comply maliciously by changing my name every day, but immediately after having that thought, I realized the extra load that it would put on my teachers. I talked to others about it, and I realized the school board should be the ones fighting for us students. I shouldn't have to fight for the right to my name, nor should my teachers have to. By resisting this law, you not only have the chance to influence schools, you have the chance to influence the attitudes of youth in the greater community. You have the chance to influence my attitude as I graduate from the MCCSC system this next summer, and you have the chance to influence how the students younger than me will feel about the safety of the MCCSC community moving forward. You have the chance to take the lead in speaking for and representing us as a community. Thank you.
A representative from Kaleidoscope Youth also urged the school board to protect its youth in light of the recent legislation.
I'm using the name Skunk in solidarity with youth members of Kaleidoscope and in opposition to a law that does not give youth the contextualized right to decide how they should be known. The youth themselves are best equipped to decide when and with whom they share information about themselves. The mandate of HB 1608 establishes that there is a problem between parents and schools, kids and teachers. It's not the case that in general schools are keeping information from parents. It's not the case that teachers and students are in opposition to one another. We cannot pit respecting our students and caring about their well-being against a perceived sense of parental and child protection. Such mandates position schools, teachers, and educators to model, reproduce, and promote bullying for a group of youth that are already marginalized and relatively unsafe in schools. It's harmful to refuse students the right to name themselves in classes and harmless to let them do so without informing their parents. The potential for harm is not being accurately assumed through this mandate and others like it. I urge MCCSC to file a lawsuit against the state. Any other response in support of students is only first aid, necessary but insufficient. I have thoughts on that first aid, and I'm really happy to share them. I have a whole list, but I think I'll get the ding ding if I start going through it. So lastly, I just want to say that we must be careful not to assume that youth in our district would not face repercussions for having their names and pronouns reported to parents, or would not suffer if their correct pronouns were treated as wrong. Outing kids both in school and out without them choosing when and how, without them being prepared for this, and without important supports in place is cruel and unethical. We cannot be both for our LGBTQ+ youth and for this law.
Then, Superintendent Dr. Jeff Hauswald delivered his report providing an update on the school system's anti-racism policy.
I did want to mention that the Student Equity Ambassadors had a summer leadership academy. It concluded on August 17th. The Student Leadership Academy was really the first of its kind. It consisted of 3 full days, 2 which took place in the summer, 1 which concluded just this past week. I know on Thursday I had an opportunity to come over and speak to the students and to the Midwest Equity staff. And it was aimed at preparing 30 high school students, teacher representatives, and members of the district's equity project team, their work throughout the school year. The participants learned how to recognize and prevent microaggressions, but they also worked on what's called youth participatory action research, so YPAR. And I know, board, you'll see sort of a timeline that's going to update you on this, the upcoming year. You'll see YPAR listed on there. That's the youth participatory action research. So it's really just youth-led action research to affect change related to our anti-racism policy 5518. And it focuses on addressing issues affecting our schools. The students are getting ready to conduct research, conduct data analysis to propose student-centered strategies. Again, I'll repeat that, student-centered strategies will enhance the school community related to our policies goals. We expect many positive contributions to continue to come from our student equity ambassadors as we work towards addressing the important issues related to racism and bias in all of its forms in our community and throughout the school year. A timeline for this work, more information is on our website. As you know, our board passed an LGBTQIA plus resolution related to the working hard to eradicate and remove bullying and harassment that takes place for our LGBTQIA plus community. With special thank you to the community organizations, to this, I think our student left, that spoke tonight and really continue to speak passionately for that. I know the next step related to that resolution as we work to create a parallel policy addressing the needs of our LGBTQIA plus community is convening of many of our community organizations, our student voices, to make sure that we come back to the board and provide a robust policy. And then with that, the educational materials necessary, the action research to make sure that we continue to provide an inclusive environment for all of our students.
The MCCSC School Board will meet again on Tuesday, September 26th. During the August 21st meeting of the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission, officials heard a resolution for an impact analysis of the Bloomington Certified Technology Park with the IU Public Policy Institute. Interim Director and Assistant Director for the Arts, Holly Warren, presented the proposal.
So again, I'm Holly. I'm the Interim Director of Economic and Sustainable Development. So in order to retain our technology park certification, we have to submit an application for recertification. Part of that application includes a third-party impact study of the park that covers from 2019 up to the present. We're proposing to contract with IU's Public Policy Institute to do this third-party work, and we're asking you to approve that contract today. A draft of that contract is in your packets. The study overall would cost $49,825. IU's PPI will finish their report, of course, in advance of this application deadline. We acknowledge that that is a very quick turnaround time. When we were told about this process, we were not anticipating that the initial deadline was going to be September 29th. So we're trying to get this done fast, but I also do want to share that Dee and our colleagues over at the Public Policy Institute have worked with IEDC to give us a 2-week extension on the contract. So the entire application will not be due now until October 13th. So that is a good thing, but we are very much wanting to expedite the process for this third-party analysis to take place so we can make sure that we make that deadline and qualify for this potential increase of funds.
The commission members discussed the history of this kind of work, noting that it is unprecedented because this is the first year that an impact study has been required.
I have a question. Who's done this work for us historically, and what's been the average cost?
There has not been specifically this work done. This is the first year that the IEDC has required a third-party impact study. I asked several different firms for quotes because PPI has done similar studies for us, specifically in the Trades District. They were kind of like the one we kind of wanted to go with because they're pretty familiar with what's going on and kind of the players that are already part of it. And they honestly did have the best price when it came down to it. So I would say if we had a full staff, like if I had 10 people under me, the cost of this would be much less. Basically because it will be myself and an intern and a few people in my department. We had to ask a lot of IU for this study to get it done on time. Had I had the year that I thought I was going to have to do this application, probably wouldn't have to be asking so much of them. But it's more of a manpower issue than anything, or a person power issue, I should say, to get this done.
Commissioner Sarah Bowerly-Dansman said that she appreciates that the commission is working with Indiana University on the impact analysis.
Well, I really, for one, love the fact that we're using IU for this. So I think that that's a really positive thing. It adds also to my understanding of the center that we would be contracting with. Is that I think that they also use some, there's a kind of pedagogical value to it as well that I think is really fantastic. And since you said that you asked for multiple bids and that this was far lower, I think that kind of allays some of my concerns.
The Commission approved the resolution unanimously. On August 23rd, the Monroe County Board of Commissioners met to approve Monroe County jail improvements and rezoning requests. Monroe County Health Administrator Lori Kelly reported on the continued increase in COVID cases and emergency room visits. The emergence of BA 2.86 earlier this month has raised concerns with experts over the new variant's highly mutated genetic makeup and lack of information on the strain.
We are monitoring the variant EG5. This has been noted to be taking a lead in the cause of cases. Also, a new concern is BA 2.86. This new variant is genetically different from Omicron. Therefore, this is a highly mutated variant. It's unclear at this time as to whether this strain will cause more severe illness. But just as a reminder, there are many ways in which we can protect ourselves and others from serious illness from COVID-19. This includes hand hygiene, ensuring we are up to date with vaccines, testing at the onset of symptoms, and use of a mask.
Later, Jail Commander Kyle Gibbons requested an extension on their contract with Combined Public Communications and the addition of the program Text Behind, an off-site document scanning service that can be used to send mail and electronic messages directly to inmates. The service will require no additional funding or cost from inmates.
We're really trying to increase efficiency. And as you guys have probably know, that when it comes to legal mail and mail in general, that is something there's high liability with, not just with the protection of the facility, but with ensuring inmates can properly correspond with their attorneys, and the courts, and the family, and things of that nature.
After concerns of an off-site facility potentially breaching attorney-to-client confidentiality, Gibbons assured the commissioners that mail of legal matters will be sent directly to the jail to be opened in front of the inmates. The motion passed 3-0. During the August 21st board meeting of the Richmond Bean Blossom Community School Corporation, Assistant Superintendent Matt Irwin gave his regular report.
Education fund, the revenue and expenses were pretty close. Expenses were a little bit higher. I had projections higher than what they came in, which is always a good thing. Last 4 months of the year, we'll move around a lot. We got to shore up ADM. We'll have to go through negotiations. We'll look at staff pay. We'll do all those big things that come up the end of the year. So that number will continue to move around, but again, in great shape. Nothing to worry about there. I did make updates to it based on the Form 54. Been continuing to mess around with a little bit on the formula projections as far as, you know, if ADM comes in at this, if ADM comes in at that. So starting to look a little closer at that. I've also started working on the 2024 projections. That also helps me during the budget. So, and we'll talk about the budget in a little bit. So debt service. Nothing to really report out there other than, again, we made all of our scheduled debt payments in the month of July, so you'll see those. End of the month where we ended was exactly where we thought we would be. Was only off by about $1,000, so that's a good thing. And then in the operations fund, things came in pretty close again as well. We've gotten to the point where we're kind of queuing in on where we're going to be on a lot of these pieces, so I'm feeling really comfortable there. And then again, just doing some of the same things with the operations funds that I talked about, the education fund. We've continued to show eating into some cash in the operations fund, but at this point, that's not something that I'm really worried about. So.
Then, Irwin explained the 2024 budget forms for the school corporation and requested permission to advertise them.
On the budget, I put in the board packet just a copy of the Form 3, which is what gets advertised out on Gateway. That's what every school corporation in the state does. They have to advertise that Form 3. We'll put the capital projects plan, the bus replacement plan would go on the school website. It also gets posted to Gateway. I gave you some comparison numbers of last year's budget numbers as opposed to this year's budget numbers, just so that you could kind of see kind of what the difference was. Try to, again, you look at what that attributes to. Again, when we advertise, we set the ceiling of what our numbers are. We can always work budget numbers down, but once we advertise, we set that ceiling. So when you look at debt service, that number is inflated right now. So when we put in that anticipated debt payment, as we continue to work in going through the sale of those bonds and structuring the sale of those bonds, we'll work that number down. And when the DLGF looks at our budget, they'll place in that number of what our actual sale was on those bonds and what that payment is. That will replace the number that I put into Gateway, which inflates what it is that we have in our projections. The other thing that factors into that is the AV. I don't put in the true AV at this point. We put in, DLGF recommends that you put in 85% of the previous year's AV when you put that number in, and that's just to protect the school corporation. And again, so that we project high, we set that limit. That allows, that protects us as far as if there was a change in AV or some different things like that. That way we can make sure that we take care of our debts when we need to make those payments. So we'll continue to whittle that stuff back. Operations fund is pretty straightforward. We are set by the levy is set by the MLGQ, which the legislature capped at 4% this year. We were eligible for the 9%, but again, they capped us, and so we're not able to take advantage of that increased MLGQ, even though we would have structured that within our total debt service rate. It got capped at the 4%, so that's all that I'm able to put on the Form 3. So that's what you'll see there on the Form 3. So again, we'd advertise, we'll go through the process of next month, we'd have that hearing, which is again, is that the public's ability to come in and make public comment on the budget specifically. And then in October is when we have our adoption meeting. So we actually adopt, and then I send off all the forms to the DLGF, and then we eventually get our 1782 notice. So things are looking good. We feel really good about hitting our total tax rate goal. Had another good conversation with Stiefel today about the sale of the bonds and making sure that we look at our strategy and to make sure that we land that plane where we want to land it. And again, just kind of following suit with that, we put that general property tax information info on the website just so the community can look at what we're doing. And it's staying true to that plan and continuing down that road of managing that rate and then finding opportunities that if we feel like we can lower that total tax rate, that we will. And so that's what we've continued to look at and have discussions on. So when you look at those numbers, hopefully you've all been through this process a number of times, so you don't get too worked up as you see some of those percentages that are a little bit misleading, but we'll continue to work through it and everything looks good.
The school board approved the permission to advertise the 2024 budget forms unanimously. On August 24th, the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission heard an update on Old State Road 37 from the Department of Planning and Transportation. Department Director Scott Robinson provided the update on Cascades Park.
My understanding, the Historic Preservation Commission is considering and looking at a historic district. I believe the Parks Department, with their recent improvements, is being considered to be placed on the National Register for some of the historic attributes of the park. To kind of rewind to where we are with planning trails, paths, new connections throughout our community, and multimodal transportation, the north area of the community, we've planned for a number of facilities for bike lanes, trails, sidewalk connections to connect our parks, schools, and other destinations. With that, there has been prioritization of some of these projects. There's been bonding, GO bonds, and other projects that have been funded through City Council, both to fund improvements for Griffey Lake Dam, the pier, other side paths and multimodal transportation facilities to help connect our area resources such as Griffey Lake, Lower Cascades, Upper Cascades Park, and our schools. The one particular section of roadway on Old State Road 37, roughly from about the IMI entrance on the south end, going north about a half a mile, is very narrow and very challenging. So you have steep slopes on one side of the roadway, you have a creek on the west side, and then you have trees and some historic features, benches and shelters and what have you. When our department's looking at implementing facilities, which this is identified as a multi-use path, we're looking at the feasibility of how to implement that facility on this particular portion of roadway. It presents a lot of challenges with us, both environmentally, historically, through that section of roadway because it's very narrow. So there's basically 4 alternatives that we're looking at. One of them is kind of the do-nothing approach. We could do nothing here. You know, for accessibility reasons, at a minimum, I would suggest we should looking at installing a sidewalk on that section of roadway that would connect from Miller Showers Park going north to the existing facility that we've built along Old State Road 37. The other option would be a one-way road alternative, which is kind of confusing to think about. So one portion of the roadway would be allocated to vehicles, motorized vehicles going one direction. We don't know which way would be best, north or southbound. And the other portion could be converted to a multi-use pathway. That alternative, something that we could be considered moving forward, is alternative number 2. The third alternative would be to build side path or that you see, like, for example, on the current roadway to the north from Clubhouse Drive all the way over to the Ferguson Dog Park into lower Griffey Dam, where you have the roadway and then there's a little bit of a grade separation and a 10-foot wide path. And then the last option would be to build a multi-use trail, which is completely separated from the road, kind of like the Beeline Trail. It's a wider facility. All those have trade-offs with this particular section of roadway of what impacts it would have both environmentally to the park, to the trees, and what have you. And then the last alternative would be to close the roadway for this one section of roadway to convert that roadway into a multi-use facility.
Commission member Sam DeSoler said that the commission looks at items through a historic preservation lens rather than a budgetary lens. He asked Robinson for broader clarification on what the council is asking of them. Robinson responded.
Usually we don't focus on budgetary constraints. We don't focus on a lot of implementation constraints, except in that they diminish the historic nature of whatever resource or whatever structure or whatever landscape we're looking at. This is on the National Register, and I do think that the commission would very much like to be involved in the process of how do we address the needs of the community versus the impetus of the commission. And one of the things that we consider sometimes is making something a district to add an additional layer of review and protection for historic resources. If we decide to recommend that to the Common Council, do you see any downsides?
Well, that's a great question. I would say currently no, because there's enough environmental and other constraints that if the city were to use any federal funding, that really limits our opportunity to leverage that resource. That's typically what we look to do on many of our capital projects for transportation, is to leverage federal money. So the mere fact that it's a park raises a red flag for the feds when we look at federal money. National Register is another one. The environmental constraints is another one. I mean, I could keep going down the list. There's a lot of things that would, in this particular section of roadway, would trigger much scrutiny by the federal and other agencies to leverage federal funding.
The commission voted to table the motion to a later date in order to review the proposal. And that's all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Rob Stockwell.